Veterans, what was something you saw or experienced that you never shared with anyone? Back in 2010, northwest of Sangin, Afghanistan, I was the corpsman for my group of 4 Marines. We specialized in joint terminal attack controllers, guys who call in aircraft, and we're supporting the Georgian army in creating a new patrol base. We get to the area where the base is going to be built, sandwalls, FTW, and base camp out in our trucks until the bulldozers finish building the walls and filling up HESCO barriers. Around the second day, near noon, we hear an explosion and see in the distance a large smoke cloud. We radio to see if there were any friendly forces near that area, but no coalition forces were near us. We then mount up to go check it out, and as we near the site, we see 2 adult figures running around a van that hit an improvised explosive device, IED. As we pull up, there is a 6-passenger Afghan van that looks like it hit an IED. This van was demolished, charred, and the engine was on fire. As we dismount, the 2 adult males run to us. This freaked us out because they might be insurgents, but our interpreter was there and told us that they were brothers asking for help because one of the brothers had 4 daughters in the van with them when they hit the IED. We rush to the van and there is still smoke everywhere, but we start pulling on the rear driver door and I can hear one of the daughters still screaming inside. As we pry the door open, we look inside and I will never forget what I saw. Inside was all charred, smoke was still coming out of the van, and in the seats was what remained of the 4 daughters. 3 of the daughters were torn apart by the explosion with limbs and body parts everywhere. The 4th was still holding one of her sister's amputated hand, while her other hand was pressed on her side. The blast had amputated her lower left leg, going up to her pelvis. She was trying to scream, but she was already losing too much blood, making her lose consciousness. We pulled her out, and I got to work trying to stop her from bleeding out, but I could only keep her alive for 15 more minutes. The father and uncle held her hand as she never woke up from losing consciousness. Me and my Marines started collecting the body parts of the other daughters so the father and brother could bury their remains. Their ages were 4, 4, 5, and 6. Frick, Afghanistan. This is definitely going to make me out to be an a-hole, but it happened and it's not a story I share with anyone. I was in Iraq for 7 months doing convoy security. We would drive all over the country delivering supplies and personnel wherever we were ordered to. It wasn't uncommon for all the kids of smaller villages to run along the roadside asking for muffins or Gatorades or any other thing they could. At first, we would regularly throw snacks to them. It was cool seeing their smiling faces after they caught a chocolate muffin or a fruit punch Gatorade. We'd feel like Santa Claus, winning the hearts and minds of the younger generations, ensuring they would never turn to terrorism, winning the war on terror one muffin at a time. But of course, things changed. Another unit had an accident, and a couple of kids got run over or hurt basically trying to catch snacks being thrown to them. So our new standard operating procedure was not to give out anything whatsoever to keep the kids from grouping around our vehicles as we rolled through their towns. This didn't stop them from gathering, and it almost made them more desperate in their attempts to get anything from us, even asking for water, which was something they would actually reject when we were throwing out snacks at them. So, we're rolling through this city at a painfully slow speed. Reports of IEDs being found nearby recently, coupled with all the civilians who lined the road, made us extra careful not to drive over anything or anyone that would compromise the safety objective of our mission. As I'm scanning the road and the people ahead of me, I spot this adorable little Iraqi girl halfway hiding behind her father's leg as she stares at us with her big green eyes. She must have been around 4 or 5. I knew we weren't supposed to give them anything anymore, but my heart melted for her, so I handed my gunner a muffin and asked him to toss it to that little girl, and he did. Her father got this huge smile as he gave us a thank you wave, and the little girl, excited that she got a muffin, ran up the road to show another group of kids her snack when this boy, who had to have been at least 12, just shoved the crap out of the little girl and snatched her muffin away. My whole truck was annoyed. Little terrorist sucker shoving a little girl not even half her size. I was livid as it was a very violent shove, and the little girl exploded into tears as she sat there in the dirt, muffinless. As we continued to roll toward the group of kids, I handed my gunner my pee bottle, a bottle of Gatorade that I would pee into while driving because we didn't stop for pee breaks while on a mission, and told him to toss it to that same kid. It couldn't have been more perfect. As we got closer to the group, he turned to the trucks with his mouth full of muffin and started motioning for us to throw him something. So we obliged. He greedily ran away from the rest of the group of kids who were trying to wrestle the bottle from him. Being bigger than all of them, it wasn't much of a struggle. So as he's jogging away, we see him open the bottle, then take a huge swig from the bottle before spitting it out and throwing the bottle to the floor. As we drove by him, he was still doubled over spitting and dry heaving, so we flipped him off. Marine here. We were on patrol with another squad in Ramadi, Iraq. We, 2nd Squadron, were about half a mile ahead of our other 1st Squadron squad when we heard the deafening rip of an IED. It was close. Too close. Our walkies went off like fireworks. 1st Squad was hit. They got the radio man. He was alive, but their communication was down. The radio man from my squad and I just started running towards the location of the blast. I'll never forget feeling so alone. My 22-year-old body running as fast as it could with a 19-year-old radio man in tow. We weren't even looking for threats. We just needed to get to 1st Squad. Absolutely terrifying. I just remember, if we're too slow, someone dies. When we finally arrived, the corpsman was already working on the 1st Squad's radio man. He was a bloody mess, literally. My radio man was finally able to call in the coordinates for med evac. The 1st Squad eventually grabbed the bloody radio man and dragged him into a nearby courtyard since we were all sitting ducks. Within moments, as we usually did, we took to the roofs, better vantage. As the med evac came in to collect radio man, boom, secondary IED went off right where we were caring for him. Movies depict the fog of war, but I remember going numb and slamming my M16A4 on that rooftop. I was mad, sad, and confused all at once. I instantly picked my rifle back up and began to scan the area. I looked southbound through my ACOG, Advanced Combat Optic Gun Sight, and spotted a kid, maybe 11 to 14. He was holding a phone. Mobile and cordless phones were the triggers of choice for IEDs. Unconsciously, I snapped the safety off and drew every bit of slack out of that trigger. That sear/hammer was one breath away from sending a 5.56mm through that little sucker's chest from 150 yards. I remember gasping for breath and snapping the safety back on. Did this kid pull the trigger? Maybe. Will you kill a kid? No. Is Radio Man alive? Yes. We need to get the frick out of here. I still hate this story. I've never told anyone before and don't think I ever could. On a motorcade patrol in Afghanistan, our point vehicle struck an improvised explosive device. My best friend was thrown about 10 yards from the wreckage and impaled through the chest with a piece of metal. His face was blown half off. I'll never forget it. I recognized half of his face and the other half was charred bone. He died in my arms. About 2 years later, I finally got stateside and went to see his family. They told me he wrote to them every day, and when the letters stopped coming, they knew he was gone. His 5-year-old daughter asked me how her daddy died. I didn't know what to say. My very first patient in Afghanistan was a 10-month-old girl. The father brought her to our gate asking for help. We checked her out and she is literally missing all the skin from the shoulder blade to the waist on her back left side. Burned to the bone. Dad tells the interpreter that she tripped and got cut up by gravel. Clearly she is burned. I can smell it still today. I can remember the screech she made. The charred skin I had to remove. And that a-hole just sat in the corner. Nothing I can do to right the situation other than do what I can for her. That single moment definitely set the tempo for the following 9 months. I responded to several complex suicide bombings, which resulted in hundreds of casualties, and while they bothered me, they weren't the worst thing. There was a guy in my unit. Charles Alvin Williams III was his name. He had come from a really messed up background, but wore his heart on his sleeve. He got all of us a copy of Halo while we were downrange so that we could have LAN parties when we had time. He wasn't my best friend, but he was a good friend and a battle buddy. He was going through some rough times with the deployment and other personal things, and someone caught him with his loaded pistol in his mouth. Instead of sending him home, our unit demoted him, gave him extra duty and took away his weapons for a few months. After he was given his weapons back, he resumed missions with us. We used to sit on the blue deck on CNS and smoke and talk about life. He told him that his fiancée had ended things with him and he was taking it hard. He told me, specifically, that he wrote her a letter and if she wouldn't take him back, he would kill himself. I hadn't yet been through any kind of suicide prevention training, so I wasn't sure how to respond. I told him that there are better ways to deal with the situation, but I didn't do enough. The last conversation that we had was about pulling the trigger on combatants. The last thing that he told me was that he didn't mind returning fire if he needed to, but if he ever saw someone killing an innocent person, then he would stop them himself. That night he put a 3-round burst into his head. Not a day goes by when I don't think about him and think about how I could have helped him, but didn't. We all knew he was suicidal, and none of us did a dang thing about it. Daily I think about him. Why didn't I do more? What could I have done better? I'm sorry for not doing enough, man. I didn't think you would do it. I lived in a safe house in the Kabul Green Zone a couple of years ago, working at the International Security Assistance Force. ISAF headquarters, but moving through Kabul every day. The street from my compound to ISAF was filled with pedestrian traffic and these kids who would try to sell foreigners whatever trinkets they could. I got to know them since I was there every day. I got them clothes for winter, random snacks from the chow hall, and we played Angry Birds together. They spoke with me, brought me scarves I asked for, and little gifts every once in a while. They also kept the other peddlers away. One day, a kid, 12 to 14 years old, from elsewhere came to the area with a bomb in his backpack. He intended to kill foreigners moving in the area or target one of the compounds. The local kids noticed him and apparently told him to get lost, and he detonated his bomb. 4 kids were killed along with the bomber and a couple of adults. A dozen or so injured maybe. I knew each one of the kids. Kushi, a little girl who was learning to skate. Nawab, who, in my view of things, looked to have a hard crush on one of the other girls who was killed. Another boy had a brother a year or so older who looked just like him. I saw the one killed and saw the other a week later, trying to sell things again. It freaked me out. I was at the site of the bombing not 30 minutes before I felt it while inside ISAF. Seeing the bodies after was a mistake. I didn't need to be there. I walked by the site every day until I left that base. The night of the attack, I could still smell blood and the damp smell of wet Kabul dust mixed together. Every day I went by, I could see their bodies and the surrounding gore in my head. I have seen the aftermath of vehicle-borne IEDs in Iraq, where hundreds were killed, but something about knowing those faces so well. Kids that would have done well if not born into such a backward shithole. It didn't help that right after, my ex told me I deserved to see those things since I chose to be there again. I was never the popular kid in high school and got picked on a lot throughout my entire kindergarten through 12th grade education. I joined up at 17 to get away from home and start earning my own money. I also got picked on a lot in basic. Soldiers spending more time fighting each other than the enemy. It's not that way for everyone, but enough so that it's sad. Anyway, I wasn't the lowest on the rung in basic. Luckily, it was another guy in his early 20s. He was a nerd like me, but he also messed up and failed a lot. Your typical Gomer pile. I won't list all his infractions as I can't remember them all, but one night we were out in the field doing training. It was like 5 to 6 weeks in and we were doing land nav. My fire watch had just ended, so I headed to the only porta-john in our area to relieve myself before racking out again. I get there and the door is locked, so I knock and ask how long they were going to be. He asked, "Dr. Psych, is that you?" It was Gomer Pyle, of course. "Yeah, man, hurry up, I've gotta go." "I can't, man. The guy before me crapped on the seat and I couldn't see and I sat in it." Freaking Gomer Pyle. "Okay, man, just stay there." Where was he going to go? "I'll be back with some baby wipes and hand sanitizer." "Could you bring me my spare uniform too? I think I got some on it." "Sure, man." I never told any of the other guys about it. His life was hard enough. I'm no longer in contact with him, so there's no way for this to get back to the guy. I can't even remember his name anymore. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts, reactions, and of course your own wild stories in the comments. And here's another video YouTube thinks you'll love.